I am very excited to be talking about financing carbon dioxide removal with four extremely insightful panelists who also happen to all be amazing women in tech and in climate. I love when this happens. This is not a gender panel, but it just so happens that we're all fabulous and we all happen to be women, so that's something nice to celebrate on a Tuesday evening. So I would like to start with introducing the panelists very briefly, and then I would love for you to tell us more about yourselves and your company. So starting from the right, we've got Kel Coulson from Carbon Engineering, then we've got Caitlin Whale from Counteract VC, Hannah Oyanen from Carbon Culture, and then Megan Edge from Ripple. The reason why I'm so excited to have these four humans with us is because we've got two very exciting providers, suppliers of carbon dioxide removal, representing two different methods, direct air capture and biochar, at different levels and stages of their development. We've got a very exciting, recently announced Series A investment, and then we've got a company recently acquired by a much bigger player. So speaking to different stages of growth in the industry, then we've got an amazing venture capital firm that exclusively invests in CDR, Counteract VC, and on top of it, a buyer and an investor in CDR. So I really think we're going to have a very full and complete discussion on all the different parts of the capital stack that are needed to build what is estimated to be the incoming $1 trillion industry. So maybe if we just frame it very, very quickly, carbon dioxide removal, what is it? The IPCC says we need 10 billion tons of carbon to be removed each year by 2050 in order to stand a fighting chance of staying below 1.5. That means it's an emerging, huge commercial opportunity as well as a massive challenge because we need to build an industry faster than ever before. So great to have you guys behind the driving wheel because it means we actually might get there. So let's get going. Kel, how about we start with you? Give us a little bit of a background on you and on your company.
I sat at the end to go last, so this will be just a great flip. So Kel Coulson, I'm the Director of Policy at Carbon Engineering, and for those who might not be familiar, Carbon Engineering is a clean technology company based in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. We still think of ourselves as a startup, but we were founded in 2009 by Professor David Keith, and our mission was to create direct air capture technology at climate relevant scale. So at Carbon Engineering, our core expertise is removing carbon dioxide directly out of the atmosphere. Once we've captured that carbon, we can put it safely and securely underground where it came from, or we can combine it with green hydrogen to produce fuels such as sustainable aviation fuel that are drop-in ready. So our mission was to create technology that could have climate relevant scale for direct air capture, and it's taken us 14 years. So I want to give a little bit of overview of that journey. So founded in 2009, University of Calgary. 2015, we moved to the West Coast and our pilot plant was commissioned. We got enough data and proof of concept from our pilot plant to commission our Innovation Center in 2021. Our Innovation Center is our full-time R&D facility. At this facility, we're able to gather data and inform plant design. That gave us the confidence to have a plant design for our first commercial plant, which began construction in 2022. When that plant is complete in 2025, just coming up with new timelines, 2025, it will be the largest direct air capture plant in the world, and it's capable of capturing 500 megatons, a half megaton of CO2 per year. The other exciting piece about that's happened recently, as you mentioned, is that we've become acquired by our plant development partner. So we're a technology provider, and we were always a technology provider. That was our core competency, and we looked for plant developers. Our plant developer 1.5 recently purchased us and making us the first climate tech unicorn. And what that allows us to do is take our R&D team and go faster. We have line of sight on bringing down the cost of capture in two trains. One is efficiency. We can knit our technology together more efficiently, and we have line of sight on how to do that. The other one is our revolutionary piece where we're doing new processes, new materials, and so all of this helps us drop the cost of carbon quicker. With that investment, it allows us, the research and development team, it's pretty well their dream. Everything is funded, so that's kind of our mission. I'd say there's a plug for those who are at COP in the Energy Transition Center when it's open tomorrow. You can see the full scale of where the technology is, and there's a great overview. So I was kind of joking that when we started at Carbon Engineering, we brought our own panels and popped them up, and now there's a booth with a model, and it's amazing to see it go to commercial scale.
Very exciting. If I may, let's go to Hannah next. So we have both of our suppliers represented.
Yeah, thanks, Marta. So I'm Hanna Oinen, head of carbon markets and policy at Carboculture. We're a Finnish-American company doing biochar carbon removal. We've had 2 pilots in California running from 2018, so a bit later than the one from Carbon Engineering. However, we just built our 3rd final pilot in Finland, which is our full-scale industrial pilot funded by the European Innovation Council. This pilot's already one of the biggest carbon removal facilities in Europe, with a capacity of 3,000 tons of CO2 removal per year. We're also, of course, developing biochar applications, mostly focusing on permanent storage applications, so soil and construction. We've got some grants from the German government to create biochar and cement applications, and also focusing on the soil applications. In addition to that, the most exciting news, in addition to us being at COP this week, is that we raised our Series A, 18 million, led by Gen Zero, which is of course a fantastic addition to a carbon removal company, and True Ventures, who were already investing us before. This happened this week, of course. Now we're at COP. Before that, our journey has been really from being a biochar company at first. I mean, the carbon markets really changed everything for us. Before, biochar, didn't really have the economics to make it scale to a size that would make a dent in the global emissions and global carbon removal capacity at the scale and speed required by the IPCC. But now we've seen tremendous demand. We were part of the world's largest diversified portfolio of carbon credits, led by South Pole, with companies such as Mitsubishi, UBS, WIS3, BCG. We're very happy to be a part of that. Our carbon removal is ICRO verified by Puro Earth. So when it comes to integrity in the VCM, definitely that's very important to us. But of course, I'm based in Brussels, looking at compliance markets and kind of the next steps for us as a company and for the market as a whole. Looking forward to also building our first commercial facility in 2025.
Amazing, thank you. Katie, over to you.
Awesome, thank you. It's wonderful to be here with such a diverse group of stakeholders and all women. I'm Caitlin Whale. I've been part of the founding team at Counteract, which is a dedicated carbon removal fund based out of London that invests in pre-seed and seed stage companies, each with the potential to catalyze half a gigaton of carbon being removed by 2050. There I was a principal, and 4 months ago transitioned to an entrepreneur in residence, where I've now moved back to South Africa to start Kinjani, which is a venture builder trying to get more sub-Saharan African companies building solutions in this space, where there's a lot of structural advantages to doing it there, and huge cities and mega cities are going to be built where we can actually integrate carbon removing materials from the start. So super excited to be here and look forward to hearing from the rest of the panel.
Amazing, and very excited to have the Global South represented on the panel as well. Megan, over to you.
Yeah, so I wear 2 hats here. One is of the corporate purchaser. So my parent company, who gives me my paycheck, is Ripple. You may know Ripple as the blockchain solutions provider, cross-border payments. What you might not know is that our chairman of the board is super philanthropic and has a lot of money. And in May of 2022, he decided to make it a core part of Ripple's mission to invest in carbon removal, just generally, broadly. So we did a $100 million investment into carbon removal technology. Half of that, or just about half of that, went into equities and grants into the infrastructure. We've invested in companies like Fallow, which are acting as a marketplace. And then the other half went towards purchases into carbon removals that wouldn't be for our own emissions. It would just be an investment. And we came up with this odd financing strategy that we thought was an odd financing strategy, which we can talk about in a bit here. But basically incubated it at Ripple and said, you know what, this would be really good as a fund. Can we get the traction of this as a fund? And so the other hat I wear is now as an investor in this fund that was born at Ripple that invests in scaling capital of carbon removal. And as I say it's not just carbon removal. We have started to dip into the avoidance space too. Also at Ripple, I'm in charge of our corporate emissions reporting, and as such, I think of things that will get us to our emissions targets. So we're in a very different setup purchases there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And clearly lots of richness for us to dig into. So we're here to talk about financing. Yesterday, BCG announced their new report that talks about us having between $5 and $11 trillion of a gap each year that we need to finance the climate transition. Obviously, a portion of that is carbon removals. If we think about 10 billion tons a year by 2050, even if we lowered the average cost to $100, that's still about 5% of the global economy. So clearly we're going to need a lot of money to get there. And we know that it's a critical element to us keeping below 1.5 alongside deep decarbonization. Let's talk about what's available on the market today. What kind of financing is available? How have your organizations been financed? Let's maybe start with our suppliers. What's available? What's lacking?
So I don't have a carbon finance background, so I will try to tell you from what I know about carbon engineering. We went through several raises in order to get the technology where we're at today. Now, from a commercial standpoint, we are now needing to figure out how to get institutional style investing into carbon engineering. So there was a recent announcement that BlackRock has put in $550 million into our first plant. And so that's the stage that we're at now, is saying we have this climate relevant infrastructure. And just for context, the size of our plants are about 100 acres. They last for about 30 years, and those are at scale 1 megaton per year, and they cost about $1 billion. So for us, bringing in finance to the technology's been proven at commercial viability. The challenge is that the revenue stream is carbon markets and voluntary carbon markets right now as compliance markets come online. And so for us, we're kind of having this multi-pronged approach of bringing in institutional investors, or bringing in large investment where it makes sense, and then on the policy side, ensuring that there's the right frameworks to be able to generate carbon credit prices that will sustain that 30-year lifespan. So that might not be the exact answer you're looking for, but that's kind of the stage that we're at right now after we've kind of proved out commercial, and then we've been acquired.
And I think just to point out, for instance, the BlackRock announcement that you mentioned, or the JPM announcement, the hundreds of millions, it's all terribly exciting. I think if we put it in context of the very, very many billions that we need, it still shows that there's a little bit of work to do, but there are some good signals. And Hannah, what about you? What are you seeing? What's available to emerging CDR players?
Exactly. So in addition to the BCG report, there was also a report from McKinsey that was published on Monday, and they said that from that amount, said by Marta, it's 400 billion to 1.6 trillion. That's missing from the funding from CDR industry from today towards 2030. Of course, these are huge amounts, and they're going to go exactly to projects like carbon engineering and carbon culture. We're at the moment still in the process of securing the funding for our first commercial facility. So for us, it's really the idea of blended finance that we need. We've raised Series A, but VC money is too expensive for infrastructure. I mean, we're talking about hardware, putting steel on the ground. Traditional infrastructure investors, are looking for, lower returns, lower ROIs that, would fit us, but then they're usually traditionally used to having low risk as well, which of course we can't provide with our first commercial facility. So we're now working with governments and also the European Union to find these kinds of funding structures where we can create this blended finance approach to actually fund and then replicate our first commercial facility according to traditional project finance principles. So have long-term offtake agreements and so on.
Definitely lots of talk of blended finance and offtake agreements in this space. Let's hear from our VC. Clearly, VC flows to where the biggest opportunities lie and some risks. What's your view? Is there enough capital in the market?
No, I think we've heard that that's a big no. But I think it's interesting to see how the different types of capital are coming together. And maybe to just ground it in a real example, I know from having done an investment into a company in Kenya that's injecting carbon dioxide underground into the basalt rock. They were able to pre-sell carbon credits, which as a VC investor, where we were putting the first money in, it was really helpful to de-risk, to know actually there are customers, and this is Frontier Fund, but it's really great to hear about Ripple's mandates as well, where you can see that there are mandates and there are demands for the products and being able to unlock that early stage, and that's just the early stage. We're also learning about first of a kind type financing, where you need to start getting to the scale like carbon engineering is going, and it really does require different risk appetites and different types of capital coming together and doing it in a much more efficient way than if we compare it to the renewable energy market, how that type of infrastructure scale financing got to. So it's really around collaboration, and I guess where we operate is at the very early stage and helping those companies get the kind of science off the ground.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to add to that, what I think I'm encouraged by when we're thinking about VC actually is the acquisition of carbon engineering, in theory, should mean that there be more growth capital from the VC space coming into the market. So thanks guys for your hard work. All right, Megan, over to you. The collaboration on this panel with the scarcity of mics, like the scarcity of capital, but we make it work.
So I would say, so with Ripple, we actually started off very philanthropic, and I was at the BPCF on, I forget what day it is today, so I definitely forget what day I was there. But I was at the BPCF at some point in time in the past few days, where there was this really great panel with Ray Dalio and Bill Gates and a few others on philanthropic capital, because philanthropists generally take the risk. And so at Ripple, obviously, this is what started our whole corporate investing strategy. And I think to one answer to your question, is there enough money in the carbon removal space? I think a lot of it has to come even more from philanthropists, and we've seen that in the past week. Now, on the finance space, we also saw a lot of inventory getting locked up from these ideas of offtakes. You've seen a lot of agreements in the past year from Heirloom, from Charm, and we think they're obviously really great projects, but companies would commit these massive commitments and it would get their inventory locked up. And we thought, okay, well, obviously now they have to rely on that capital when it comes in, when they deliver their credits in X years' time. So we've tried this idea, and we've seen a few others start to adopt it too, because we're certainly not the first to invent it, but the idea of a prepayment on an offtake, where we would offer anywhere between 50 to 100% capital up front for pretty much a traditional carbon credit raise. We would still get a delivery of credits, just in anywhere between maybe 12 to 24 months as the first delivery. So it gave these projects access to upfront capital, which allows them to scale into a new region or facility or get closer to their logistics, reducing their LCA. And that's kind of the capital that I personally think the market needs to do more of. And I think we're on the right track too.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned working capital. I think any founder or leader of a company will know that working capital gaps are incredibly hard to plug, especially when you have scientific risks, technological risks, supply chain challenges. So I think what you're pointing to is really, really important. Actually, at Curate, we're working on a solution to use offtakes as collateral to provide debt to suppliers, and affordable debt. And how do we teach the wider finance industry to understand and price the risk so that we can unlock these capital flows? But what you mentioned, Megan, actually sort of leads nicely to my next question, which is the blurred lines between investing and purchasing of credits. Because exactly to your point, if buyers were willing to do prepayments, ultimately it almost makes you as much of a buyer as it is an investor, which is why we're all talking about investing in carbon removals, whether one is a financial institution or not. I mean, I take it as something encouraging because it means that more organizations can play a role. We think about the role that, say, Stripe or Microsoft have played in advancing this space. But maybe, again, it'd be interesting to hear from Hannah and from Cal. What's your take on, how do you see the difference between who invests in you and who buys your credits, and how that contributes to your growth?
Well, of course, I'm coming from the policy and market side, so in that sense, I will also speak from my knowledge within carboculture. For us, of course, our investors are tremendously important. They guide our work. They need to have the same values and having an integrity focused voluntary carbon market, and to give us time to really do things science first. So in that sense, traditional VC money, traditional investors from that side have been very fortunate to have great investors who understand our journey and understand the journey with carbon removal. Of course, with credit purchasers as well, there's a lot of synergy, right? So many of the people who buy our credits are also companies that could invest and want to invest. So in that sense, it's a great way to get to know the ecosystem, and for the buyers and investors to get to know the companies, understand them better, understand what's driving them and what are their capabilities. So of course, we'd like to see the line being blurred as much as possible, because it's just a way of deepening the collaboration. Of course, for us, when it comes to credit purchases, we do want to also drive the market towards pushing those credit purchases to really be in the hard to abate emissions eventually. So of course, we want to be able to push that as well.
Can I add one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this will be from the perspective of one of the companies Contract invested in. They are Australian-based biomass burial, and they both raised capital from Contract at the pre-seed stage, but also sold credits to Zurich Reinsurance. And you're seeing a lot more reinsurers coming into this space as they're needing to price in what the climate risks are and try and mitigate against that. And I think, just to add, like, it's an interesting trend, and I'd love to hear with carbon engineering if you had anything similar. So
I wanted to pick up on the hard to abate piece because a lot of our pre-purchases are from the aviation sector. We have an IATA net zero roadmap that was released this summer, and that shows how much gigatons of carbon removal as well as sustainable aviation fuel are needed. So we've had Airbus announced 400,000 tons pre-purchase. We've had ANA, which is a Japanese airline, purchase as well, and Air Canada invested in our innovation center. So we've had aviation invest in carbon engineering in a few different ways. We see those investments, the names that come in are helpful for those that are following. And so having the people who have deep due diligence to be able to do that work kind of are the first movers. And so we've seen that a few times. We had an Amazon purchase of 250,000 tons. I hope I'm getting these numbers right for our business development people, but it's all on the website. And so, but these people that have the ability and the teams to do that deep dive, and Frontier and Stripe and all the people that have this are helping bring along the rest of the people who want to do the right thing with their money, but might not have the depth of current expertise. And everybody on this panel is kind of also figuring out how we mobilize that capital. And so I feel like the more, I don't want to say name brands, but the more recognizable brands that have great sustainability profiles really does help kind of have the domino effects of the next purchases.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll take this on. Thanks. I also think, and Curate actually did a really great article not too long ago about the distinction between carbon credit and the carbon offset. And so I think this is kind of a similar place where I know I personally use purchase and invest fairly interchangeably. But if I'm wearing my corporate buyer hat at Ripple, I usually use the word invest, because if I'm purchasing something at a corporation, I'm thinking of something I don't have to continually diligence, right? There's been so much disruption and volatility in the market this year, where you see the Disneys of the world getting dragged under from all of this headline risk. And if I'm purchasing a credit, it feels very transactional. In that space, I feel like I'm, even though it's not generating any sort of financial returns, it's sitting and it's helping with our mitigate our emissions. It feels still there's an emotional attachment to it, and honest diligence work we have to do over time.
Amazing. And let's maybe build on this, because what you started describing is what are the benefits for organizations to invest in carbon removal. And that is, that's banks, that's VCs, that's buyers. So what kind of language can we use? What can we learn from each other? And what can we evangelize at COP28 to get more capital flowing to CDR? What has worked in your experience? What are the commercial, legal, moral encouragements, carrots or sticks, incoming compliance that we can talk about?
Well, I love to turn to the IPCC numbers, which just look at, as you mentioned in the beginning, if we're going to get to 1.5 degrees, this is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So as greedy venture capitalists, we are, and I'm not meaning that genuinely, but there is huge commercial opportunity. And so being able to invest in these companies and get them on their journey at a point that's capitalistic to them means that you could potentially get a part of the upside and the value that's being created. So it's not only good for the planet, it's good from a commerciality point of view. So I think just stressing that there is the huge market opportunity is something that we like to point to. Do you want to add?
I think one of the things that the CDR community can do is that as we start proving our technology at commercial scale, and we have the MRV and we have the actual tangible credits, it's really that proof of concept to the market that we have a solution for their hard to abate. We have a solution for residual emissions. And when you look at the abatement curve and all of the people that are on the side, that's really scary when it goes up like a hockey stick, we can come in with our prices and say, we're a solution for you. And so it gives them comfort that when eventually, hopefully, as compliance markets move, as you move deeper into sectors and deeper into decarbonization, it's a solution for them that's not uncomfortable. And so, for example, DAC is expensive, and we're bringing that cost curve down, but whatever DAC company is up here, it's not cheap. But compared to some of the decarbonization of aviation, we are affordable now. And so how can we kind of thread that needle of, can we start to nudge those industries to go low and slow and start investing a little bit, but then have that snowball over time that it's a sustainable solution for them, and it brings their decarbonization down. So I feel like we're the solution set for it, and then as the prices come out and as the comfort comes out, we can kind of accelerate compliance markets maybe 10 years faster than we did, and then we all decarbonize quicker.
I think to add to the compliance market piece and also to the great potential for investors, from the same McKinsey report, they estimated that forefront investors could see returns of investment from $20 to $80 billion by the end of 2030. So there definitely is a great opportunity, and now there's numbers to prove it. Regarding compliance markets, I'm based in Brussels. Of course, the ETS, the emissions trading system, is very exciting. We're seeing more and more industries being added into the scope of the ETS, and therefore having much more incentive to actually see, okay, wait, I'm going to have to pay for this ton of carbon that I'm going to be emitting. So of course, that makes removals a lot more attractive, and I think that stick is definitely working. As we need to incentivize these companies to really look at carbon removal, especially those ones who have a net zero strategy. I think this sentence has probably been repeated here already a million times at that call, but maybe to bring it outside the CDR community, if you have a net zero strategy, you need to have a carbon removal strategy as well.
I think on the financing side, I hate to go back to emotions, but the idea of legacy works really well for both the corporate storytelling piece and also the investors that we have as LPs or getting as LPs in the fund. So on the corporate storytelling piece, I think it's what Stacey Kroc of Shopify talks about, the 100-year legacy or something. And it's talking about corporate resilience, what's going to keep a company moving in the future. A lot of that has to do obviously with its climate goals, and so that has been an internal selling point. Not that we really needed it with our chairman's philanthropic giving, but that's been an internal selling point as we continue to navigate what does sustainability look like at Ripple moving forward. On the investment side, we've attracted institutional investors, family offices. I was having dinner with the head of sustainability for wealth management at Citi last night, and we were having this conversation around, you get these larger investors who go through analysis paralysis because, they'll say, oh, I really want to do DAC, and then you'll give them all of the information for DAC, and they're like, yeah, but where's the community benefit to it? And so I think it's also, we've tried to give this story narrative around carbon removal for those types of investors because there's so many different benefits you can attach to it. And so it's done really well with that idea of, their legacy is attached to multiple things instead of one hyper-specific thing.
Sorry, can I just add? I think some of the more enabling technologies, which we haven't really spoken about, can also help companies within their own net zero strategies. For instance, as they're measuring their scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, like soil carbon measurements. Nestle is a great example of how they're using companies to measure their organic carbon stored in their soils, and then with that data drive more practices which are more organic for fertilizer. And so I guess picking up on the co-benefits piece, it's a data-driven approach to how you can drive your practices that are more sustainable and then incorporate carbon removal within it.
100%. And I have to say, you ladies set me up almost perfectly to actually mention my own company, because Curate works on portfolios of carbon removals. So we know that not a single method will scale to 10 billion tons. We need to invest in all of them, from soil carbon, biochar, enhanced rock weathering, direct air capture, blue carbon. So for those that find it too complex to navigate, what's the upside, what's the social co-benefit, what is the environmental co-benefit, or how do I get to a price point that works, there are organizations like Curate that can help with that too, and then make sure that that investment is sustainable and well balanced. Let me just check, do we have any questions for the panel in the room? All right, I see one. I'll give you a chance in just 1 minute. One last question from me before I do that. If we could wave a magic wand and have one ask to the community. And by the way, I have to say, I love your point around emotions, because from all the clients that we work with at Curate, I think the one thing that we found is that the common trait of all buyers is that there is an enlightened leader in the organization that deeply cares about this stuff, that understands, that's willing to educate themselves, that's willing to educate their board and their executives, and therefore is driving change. I think this COP is very much about bold leadership and about action. So maybe this is a little bit of inspiration for anyone in the room or listening to this, that ultimately, regardless of the size of your organization, whether you are a bank or whether you are a small, medium company, you could be purchasing carbon removal. Actually, sooner or later, you will have to. But then let's then let's appeal to those emotions to anyone who's listening. What's our ask to the universe at this COP28? How do we better finance carbon removals?
Yeah, okay. I think, there's first law, before I say first loss, I think figuring out who's accountable for the risk. That would be my really magic wand, make a wish, it's done. We should have figured out first loss capital 6 months ago, way before 6 months ago, but we personally should have figured it out 6 months ago. I think it's a conversation that's come up a lot at COP, and so I'm hoping it continues afterwards, the people thinking about who's responsible for the risk, how you mitigate the risk, because ultimately I think that's the piece that's preventing the emotions from connecting with the deployment of capital. Everyone's still figuring out, is this, how does this actually affect my balance sheet? So yeah, I'd say the risk.
Yeah, I think for me it's definitely future-proofing all upcoming regulation. One hopeful thing that's come out at COP so far is that the Article 6.4 supervisory body, so basically the body that's looking at how removals could be integrated into the NDCs, is basically developing an open door policy for upcoming methodology and upcoming innovations. If we're going to reach this 10 gigaton scale, we're gonna not be able to rely on one solution, just like Marta said. So we really need to keep the door open, and this is something that policymakers globally have actually not succeeded so well in doing. We've seen, the Inflation Reduction Act, 45Q tax credit focus only on CCS-based carbon removal technologies. Now we've seen, the US backtrack a little bit with the DOE's tech-agnostic procurement program, where they're actually looking at tech-agnostic ways of procuring CDR and CDR credits. We also see this in the European Union's carbon removal certification framework, where they haven't left this door open. So to see this happen at the COP, where things are complex and you have many players, involved, I think is really an amazing thing to see. And I hope that policymakers globally can take guidance from that, to really drive this exponential growth. We can't do it with incremental steps. So we can't rely on CCS-based carbon removal, despite its valuable role in reaching net zero. We need all kinds of things. I'm not going to list all of them. There's too many, and probably many that I don't even know about yet. So thank you.
Awesome. All great. So I'll just add onto that. I would wave my wand and say that all companies look within their supply chains and take a data-driven approach to how they are removing carbon, and also looking at localizing that. So wherever those supply chains are based, try and encourage removals at that place in a way that's most scientifically driven.
All great answers. So if I had a magic wand, it would be a global price on carbon, but because we're not going to get there, I think knowing that we've solved big issues before, and that came at global collaboration. So we've solved big issues through accords before, and so how do we do that? If we really wrap our arms around this, then going performance-based so that we're not getting a little bit of the infighting that often happens about competing for capital. Go performance-based and go compliance markets, and then it ends up being more of a regulatory journey.
Fantastic. Can we please have all of those? All right, and on to the last question from the audience.
Thanks, everyone. Really glad that 6.4 was added at the end, because that's going to be a critical way to fund projects in the global south where there's not necessarily the flow of capital we have in the global north. So really pleased that that was mentioned. But off the back of that, and I've got a follow-on question to this, do you see any room for bilateral agreements between countries? So we've seen the UAE and I think Liberia in a controversial move, but in a similar sort of sense, do you see room for, financial agreements between countries to fund CDR? And my second question is, given that we have 2 suppliers but also 2 policy experts, what policy would you encourage to unlock the capital that you need right now? Naturally, it's going to be different for biochar and DAC and the stages that both the companies are at. But if there was a policy that would solve your problems, what would that policy bring?
Thanks. I can start if that's all right. So definitely, yeah, 6.4, and I mean, I do know of these bilateral agreements taking place. I mean, that will still depend a little bit on the development of Article 6. So hopefully we will see that kind of development being realized. Yesterday we had a panel at the Finland Pavilion where we had Bila Dirangu from CEO of Great Carbon Valley in Kenya and the Minister for European Affairs and Ownership Steering from Finland, and definitely this idea that Finland has a very high and ambitious net zero target by 2035. So perhaps they could also look at this as a way to finance finance these amazing climate projects. So definitely I see a lot of room for that, and I think that should be very welcomed by global policymakers. Secondly, to your question on which policy instrument would I like to see unlocked. Well, I'm based in Brussels. Our company is headquartered in Helsinki. So for us, the EU's Innovation Fund is definitely a great source of this possible revenue for first-of-a-kind facilities. However, we've seen that at this stage, it's actually mostly just been there to support incumbents. It doesn't really accept these kinds of unfinished markets, because they expect a ready-made, profitable financial model right off the get-go of the project. So when we don't have a global price on carbon, and we might have offtake agreements, but the market is still not that stable, there's a problem. And so we really need to find ways to create these projects of common interest that we've seen a little bit happen with the Net Zero Industry Act, where carbon removals, in addition to CCS, traditional CCS, were added as a part of this. So really to unlock this, this project finance and this first-of-a-kind financing for startups and to have more risk handling ability. And we have to rely on the EU instruments. As a small country, Finland would lose out on a battle if we completely liberalized national funding policy for large-scale projects. So that would be it. Thank you.
I'm so happy we went to policy, because it's my jam. Carbon finance, I'll limp through this panel. So one of the things that is so important for direct air capture is connecting markets. So you can deploy these places, these facilities, but you need to make sure that they have the right geological sequestration if you're doing direct sequestration, and they need to have high renewable potential. Those places are not the same places that you have a demand for credits. So Article 6, ITMO trading, is exactly how you're going to need to move that. So once we get those mechanisms in place, it's super important. And then it also allows global south participation, where all of a sudden we can start moving wherever we put direct air capture plants, we can then move that to the transfer from north to south. The other piece that's maybe buried and I don't hear much, love to see some blogs on corresponding adjustments, it's the thing that unlocks the ITMO. And so at some point, the host country has to sign something saying this credit can leave this host country and go either to something like Corsia, where it's going there, or it goes to the other country. And we haven't, other than Kenya, which is a great leader in saying we are going to be an ITMO exporter, you have a lot of countries that haven't really put an ITMO strategy out there. So knowing what activities you are willing to sign off on will help, I think, unlock some of the finance that's maybe not it's not necessarily talked about a lot, but at some point, if you don't have a corresponding adjustment, you would limit the market that you could sell into.
Amazing. Any last comments on this? No? Brilliant. Then thank you so much for having us. Kel, Caitlin, Hannah, and Megan, thank you so much for powering through yet another day at COP28. Here's to more financing for carbon removals, and thank you, Slovenian Pavilion, for having us.